In light of your previous discussion regarding the role of religion and whether it was a problem, what about African American Muslims? Do they add to the problem or take away from the problem?
Well, I think that we have a lot of beautiful Muslims, a lot of beautiful Muslims, and I think most of them mean well. I think that the sort of analogy that we can find, or the template, so to speak, not analogy, more now template that we can find for black Muslim, the black Muslim community. I often think of Dr. Carter G. Woodson's book, The Miseducation of the Negro. It was based upon a certain premise. He was really critiquing the talented 10th. And the talented 10th were the group that followed the philosophy of W.B. Du Bois. W.B. Du Bois was of the opinion that the progress of the Negro race, what we call today black people or the African American people, the progress of our people will be brought about by way of investing in the brightest minds among us to go into the arts and the sciences, philosophy, etc. And they would become these bright intellects to sort of serve as the cadre of leaders for our people. So his philosophy was different from Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington had a very practical approach to what they called at the time the Negro problem. His approach said, we were enslaved, yes, but in slavery we knew how to grow crops. We knew how to be carpenters. We knew how to mend shoes. We knew how to be mechanics. So let's take those skills now. We have those skills, whether we like it or not. We actually have them. Let's take those skills and use those skills to develop a solid economic base. And upon that solid economic base, because we're so productive in these fields, then we can go into higher education, etc. Du Bois was saying, no, we should just go into higher education and get into, the political process, things like that. And there's some nuance that I'm leaving out. Obviously, I don't want to cheapen their arguments, but the miseducation of the Negro, Dr. Carter G. Woodson was basically saying, okay, we tried the Du Boisian way and it's failed us. Because all that has happened is that these blacks who are talented, who are gifted, they've gone on to get higher education at university. They study history, they study literature, they study philosophy, they study math, they study business. But when they do that, they study the history of the white man. They study the literature of the white man. They study, even when they learn about math, theories that the white man put together, the philosophies or the European, to be less crass about it. And essentially, they come back, or that learning process impresses upon them, or it reinforces really their own sense of inferiority. They're learning everything about the greatness of the same man that has them subjected in this bad situation in the first place. And they think that that's the standard. So when they come back to their people, they can't even relate to their people anymore. And they're trying to employ standards of education and excellence, etc., on their people, and it's not registering with their people. And the only conclusion that they can come to is that their people are uncivilized and not ready to be matured, as it were. And what Dr. Woodson is saying is that they're starting from the wrong premise. They have a psychological problem. And he even made the point that it's rendered us, or those people at that time, ineffective. I would still say us, because I do believe that the Du Boisian philosophy is the dominant one when you talk about the black educated class. It's failed us. They get higher education, they leave the black community. They leave the black schools, they leave the black community, they buy houses in the suburbs, etc. And for all intents and purposes, they live according to a bourgeois Anglo-Saxon standard. So they live in gentrified, if they're in the urban areas, they're in gentrified neighborhoods. They go to get coffee, they go get wine and cigars. Negroes would never drink. They weren't doing that in Africa. Where you get that from? You got that from the Anglo-Saxon. But that's another, I don't want to go too far in that direction, because I started with our situation, I think, is similar. I think that a lot of the teachers of Islam in this generation, and perhaps a generation above and some up and coming, they're good people. So I don't want this to come off as personal. They're good people, and I think they're so sincere in so much as I can tell. But in their Arab, they're what we used to call in the early 2000s Blackistanis. They dress like another race. Their mannerisms and the way they do this. And I'm not knocking them. I'm really not. And I don't want it to be taken that way. But I think that many of us, we go into another culture and it becomes overwhelming. We already come from black culture, which gives us, in our opinion, it gives us very little. We're raised to not see ourselves as much of anything. So we go into another culture and it's overwhelming. And we use the hand gestures of another race. We talk, we utter our words like another race, of another people. We begin to dress like them. And we go before our congregation, and these people are poor people. These people are uneducated people. These are people who have the same lack of self-knowledge and self-love that we have, if not worse. And when they see me as the imam or as the leader or whatever it may be, the scholar even, they're seeing me as the standard of what a Muslim should be. And if in large part, if even 50 to 70 to 80% of me is other than African American, in the sense that we all grew up in our neighborhoods knowing what a black person was, if it's other than that, I am indirectly telling them that they are not truly Muslim yet. They have to become, I don't want to say Arabized because that's not fair to the Arabs. They have to become other. They have to become other. So other than what they are. But what goes along with that, to the miseducation of the Negro part, like Dr. Woodson said, we go to a 4-year school to get a degree to learn business, to work for the white man. The foreigner study us, finds out we like peanuts and sells us peanuts and makes $1 million. In other words, our education doesn't establish us or root us in our practical common sense frame of mind. So even in our discourse as African American Muslims, we're talking about things, not all of us, but too many of us, we're talking about things that's clear as it is, it's not changing our condition. It's changing our clothes. It's changing our clothing habits. We wear beards now. We wear kufis now, but we're just as poor, just as dysfunctional. Why? Because we are articulating a discourse that was formed in another context for their dysfunctions. Those people had dysfunctions too. Those people were crazy too. And they had scholars rise up, thinkers rise up, men of wisdom and insight that Allah blessed them to come up with answers for those conditions. Well, we have a separate set of conditions. There was never such thing as a Negro before, as the brother in Philly told me. There was never a Negro before we came here. There was no such thing. Like Malcolm said, where's Negro land? So our set of idiosyncrasies, or whatever you call it, they are the product of this environment. They come from, I'm not saying that people don't do what we do, but even the historical cause of what we do, even our perception of the historical cause, we have our uniqueness. So we have yet to really develop an authentic Muslim American articulation of the religion. We are trying to impress upon black people an understanding of the religion that's just that. It's an understanding. It's not the understanding. And that's the reality. And the people will take issue with this, but more than likely, people will take issue with it. That's fine. But it's true. This is as real as the fact that I'm sitting here right now. So the Nation of Islam, and to be more specific, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, was more successful than any Sunni movement we've seen. Why? Not because of the effectiveness or the efficacy of his Aqidah per se, but because of the practicality of the message in terms of a registering of what was needed for black people. As a matter of fact, most people don't realize the Nation of Islam started in 1930. It didn't really start to gain headway until the 60s. Because up until that time, they were teaching Yaqub's history and all of this stuff that, the lessons. Wasn't no black people trying to hear that. It's not that appealing. When Elijah Muhammad got out of prison, he told the ministers, you all stop teaching that. I'm going to teach that. And he told those brothers, we finna start going into business. We're going to go into these practical things. And that's when we see the nation make headway. Because our people are poor, or we were poor. Our people needed education. Our people eat 30 times a day. In 29 of those 30 times, there's some type of pork grease inside the food. So practice how to eat to live. Stop eating all them pig knuckles. How to how should the woman behave? How should the man behave? What should be our discipline? The practical things. We accept your own, do for self. This was a message that was addressing the direct needs of the people. Now, fast forward. I mentioned this before too. In our our tafsir course, we study the book of Shah Wali Allah. He makes the point. He says that the Quran is subsumed under 5 sciences. One of them is the science of dialectic. And if you look at all of the sort of dialectical arguments, what will go under the banner of kalam, aqidah, tawheed, kalam, which is really like theology or philosophy, really. Advanced kalam is philosophical. But going back to the actual text of the Quran, all of its dialectical arguments are aimed at the polytheists, the Jews, the Christians, the hypocrites. The revelation is coming to the prophet, prayers and peace be upon him, and God is giving him arguments. God is giving him logic and reasoning to address these groups that were in his presence. And he advances his argument in his Fawzul Kabir. It's a book on a tafsir methodology, and he basically is saying, just to sum it up, because I don't want to focus on the book for this segment, but he's basically saying we have to do the same thing today. We have people who have gone back into polytheism in our time, at the time that he's writing, a couple centuries ago. We have the Muslims have fallen, as the prophet said, prayers and peace be upon him, they've fallen into the ways of the Jews and the Christians, atheism. In other words, and before I even go there, when Islam spread out into places like Iraq and Egypt, there were other groups, and the Muslims had to take from what the prophet left with them, prayers and peace be upon him, and develop new arguments. We have Buddhists now, we have Hindus, we have Zoroastrians. They had to engage these new groups based upon what they got from the Quran. And that's how a lot of the theological tradition forms, in a beautiful way. That's not a critique, that's the reality. It's not the whole picture, but it's a part of it. Well, what about today? What about today when we're dealing with racism? Or what we believe to be racism, what we believe to be structural racism? What about the savagery in black culture, the outright hedonism and demonic behavior in black culture? There's no Islamic dialectic for that now, then we have to develop one. And who should do it other than the ones that's a part of that issue? That's our job. That's a much more effective message to communicate Islam to, at least in our communities, than it is to just give me the history of a people. That stuff, no, I don't know no brother that cares if the Quran is created or not. I'm not saying that's not a valuable issue, but I don't know no brother that cares about that, meaning that it's going to change his condition. Most of the brothers I know have an inferiority complex. Most of the brothers I know don't have fathers in their lives because their fathers had a sense of inferiority. Their grandfathers, like my father-in-law said, they call me nigga every day of my life. That's what's in his psyche. That's the burden he can't get off. He's not. So you tell him, oh, you give him the whole history of whether the Quran was created or not, and we've come to the position that it's not created. It's the eternal speech of God. Okay, fine. He's still a Negro, though, because we have not applied the medicine to rid him of the burden that he has. So give me a polio shot. I don't want no polio. Give me one. What do they call them? Vaccines? That's fine. Give me my chicken pox vaccine or whatever. But right now, when you give me that, doctor, know that I actually have COVID. I can use the flu shot. I can use that. But know that what I actually have is COVID. So when you give me that, know that that has a purpose, but it's not serving what my immediate need is, if that makes sense. You see what I'm saying? So the miseducation, I'm actually going to write a book on it, inshallah. And it's not, I speak excitedly, but it's not to attack anyone, but it's real. And I don't think there's nowhere, where can you go in Black America and say, hey, look what the Muslims have done. The Muslims have reformed this. Where can you go? Nowhere. You can't go anywhere. So that tells me there's a job, because everywhere Islam went, it changed the environment. Everywhere Al-Islam went, those people rose up. Those people became civilized. Those people went into education. Those people went into every field of human endeavor. So I'm saying that hasn't happened yet. And until that happens, we can't be satisfied. And we have to have the boldness to question ourselves, to say, are we using the right medicine for the condition and the illness of our people?